Good afternoon. Buenas tardes. There was a young fellow from Trinity who took the square root of infinity, but the number of digits gave him the fidgets. He dropped math and took up divinity. Mathematician Gamow's poem captures the fact that we eventually reach our limit and must turn to God for help. But how does God help us? Today we celebrate Christ's ascension into heaven. Jesus knew his disciples would be worried without him. So he reassured them after he died. As the first reading says, he presented himself alive to them by many proofs. But he knew that his disciples would need help after those appearances and even after his ascension. All of today's readings make it clear that Jesus left behind the Holy Spirit to dwell within them and all of us, to guide us for all eternity. In today's first reading, Jesus says, "You will receive power when the Holy Spirit comes upon you." In today's second reading, Paul says, God gives you a spirit of wisdom and revelation, resulting in knowledge of him. And in today's gospel, Jesus says, I am sending the promise, meaning the Holy Spirit, of my Father upon you. Then he parted from them and was taken up to heaven. Jesus ascended to heaven and opened the door to the love of the Holy Spirit. The Father and Son jointly sent the Spirit of love, who eternally unites them with us and us with each other. In that sense, we are allowed to share in God's divinity without becoming divine, since the Holy Spirit dwells within everyone on earth, regardless of faith belief. That is, regardless of whether we recognize or acknowledge his divine presence. We are all temples of the Holy Spirit. No less than the tabernacle here is the temple of Jesus. Now, let us look at the person next to us, particularly when we have the kiss of peace, but also now, and worship the God that dwells within them. And I challenge you to look at that God next to you. Let us do that even with more intensity, when we receive the Eucharist, which is the sacrament's symbol and substance of God dwelling within our neighbor. If we are open to it, the Holy Spirit enables us to transcend our earthly bodies, to experience sharing in the divine. But how do we open ourselves to experience transcendence? How does Jesus' ascendance lead to our transcendence? Throughout the centuries, saints describe the spiritual journey in three stages: purgation, illumination, and unification. These are analogous to Jesus' death, resurrection, and ascension, respectively. During purgation, we die to self by purging ourselves of our past sins. During illumination, we are lifted up, resurrected by being illuminated by God's power and love. And during unification, we are united in transcendent love with the Holy Spirit. The mystic saints throughout the centuries describe unification as wordless contemplative experience. But we must be listening and seeing with the eyes and ears of our heart, not our intellect. How can we hear God's call, experience transcendence through the Spirit, if we are always talking? A couple practical examples may help. We recently celebrated Mother's Day. Mothers, you have been given a unique share in the divine. The love of God cradles you unceasingly, just as you cradled your baby in your womb. In God's motherly love, we are held in the womb of His love, feeling us constantly and caressing us in the warm liquid of pure love. She insulates us from the shocks of the outside world and draws us close to the beat of her heart. Mothers share this divine union in a unique way by being co-creators with God in the birth and nurturing of a soul. Mothers have a transcendent experience of the divine. Mother Teresa encountered a 25-year-old man weighing about 40 pounds, lying in bed with emaciated limbs and contorted extremities and face. He was writhing in pain. She caressed his head and rubbed his chest. Immediately he relaxed and looked intently into her eyes. Those were the eyes of Jesus' ascendance to the Father and the man's transcendence to the divine. In silence now, let us close our eyes for a moment and meditate on when we have experienced divine transcendence in our life. Allow our memory to rest in that moment again.